She became even more important to all of us, the gravitational force that kept our scattered, busy lives connected to something resembling a family unit. My parents were both incredibly successful in their careers. My mother, Patricia, was a senior partner at a corporate law firm in London, and my father, David, was a prominent cardiothoracic surgeon. They had raised me with every advantage money could buy: private schools, university education with no debt, connections that opened doors before I even had to knock. But they had not raised me with much warmth. They were busy people, important people, and I spent much of my childhood with nannies and au pairs while they built their empires. The person who actually raised me, who attended my school plays and football matches, who listened to my problems and taught me how to be a decent human being, was Gran. She lived in a beautiful old house in the Cotswolds, a place that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was the kind of house you see in magazines, all honey-colored stone and climbing roses, with a garden that looked like something from a fairy tale. Gran had lived there with my grandfather for 40 years, and after he died, she refused to leave, despite my parents' suggestions that she move somewhere smaller, more manageable, closer to London, where they could keep an eye on her. She was fiercely independent, my Gran. Even in her mid-70s, she maintained that house and garden largely on her own, with just a cleaning lady who came twice a week and a gardener who helped with the heavier work. She volunteered at the local library, hosted book club meetings in her sitting room, and was generally beloved by everyone in her village. She was everything I aspired to be: kind, intelligent, genuinely interested in other people, comfortable in her own skin in a way my status-obsessed parents had never been. I visited her regularly when I was younger, spending weekends and school holidays in that house, learning to garden and cook, and appreciate the kind of quiet, simple pleasures that my London life did not offer. She taught me to play chess, to identify birds by their songs, to find constellations in the night sky. She told me stories about my grandfather, about their adventures traveling the world on a teacher's salary, about how real wealth was measured in experiences and relationships, not in the size of your bank account or the prestige of your job title. I loved her. I genuinely did. And that is what makes what I did so much worse, because I did not betray a stranger or even a distant relative. I betrayed the person who had given me unconditional love my entire life, who had never asked for anything in return except that I be happy and kind and honest. The trouble started about 3 years ago when I was 28 and working as an investment analyst at a mid-tier financial firm in Manchester. I was good at my job, making decent money, but I was not where I wanted to be. I saw colleagues from university who had gone into tech or started their own companies, and they were making the kind of money that bought penthouse flats and sports cars and holidays in the Maldives. I was comfortable, but I was not rich, and in the circles I moved in, that felt like failure. I had started dating Sarah around that time, a nurse I had met through friends. She was lovely, genuinely kind, and caring, in a way that reminded me of Gran, actually. She was not impressed by money or status, which was refreshing at first, but eventually became frustrating. She did not understand my ambition, my need to prove myself, to achieve the kind of success that would make people take notice. I became obsessed with finding a shortcut, a way to accelerate my path to wealth. I started looking at investment opportunities that were higher risk, higher reward. I convinced myself I was smart enough to beat the odds, that my financial training gave me an edge that ordinary people did not have. And I found what I thought was the perfect opportunity: a startup company developing medical technology that was about to go through a major funding round. I had insider information, not quite illegal, but definitely in the gray area, that suggested the company was going to be valued much higher than current investors realized. The investment minimum was £50,000. I had about 15,000 in savings. I could not get a loan for the rest because I was already leveraged on my flat and my car. And that is when I started thinking about Gran. I knew she had money. My grandfather had been careful with their finances, and they had invested wisely over the years. She owned her house outright, worth easily over £1 million given the location and condition. She had pension income and investment income that was more than enough for her modest lifestyle. My parents occasionally mentioned that she was sitting on a small fortune that she would not spend on herself, that she was planning to leave it all to the family when she passed. And I started thinking, why wait? Why should that money sit in her accounts earning minimal interest when I could use it to generate real returns? I could borrow 50,000 from her, invest it, make a fortune, and pay her back with interest before she even noticed. It would be a victimless crime, except it would not even be a crime because I would return the money. I would just be using resources that were ultimately going to come to me anyway, just accelerating the timeline. This is how I rationalized it to myself. This is how I turned theft into something that sounded almost reasonable in my own head. I did not think of myself as stealing from an elderly woman. I thought of myself as being clever, strategic, making use of available resources to create opportunity. The first time I asked Gran for money, I told her I needed it for a deposit on a bigger flat. I said I had found an amazing opportunity, a place that was undervalued and would be a great investment, but I needed to move quickly and was just slightly short of the deposit required. I asked if she could lend me £20,000 just temporarily, which I would pay back within 6 months with interest. She did not hesitate. She did not ask to see details of the flat or question whether it was a wise investment. She just said that of course she would help me, that she was happy to support me in building my future, and that I should not worry about paying her back quickly because family was more important than money. I remember the way she looked at me when she said that, her eyes warm and trusting, so proud that her grandson was doing well and making smart decisions. And I looked right back at her and accepted her trust, knowing I was lying, knowing I was going to use her money for something entirely different, knowing I was betraying everything she had taught me about honesty and integrity. The money was in my account within 3 days. She had transferred it without any formal agreement, no contract, no written terms, just a family helping family. And I immediately put it into the investment opportunity, along with my own 15,000. The first few months were good. The company was performing well, the valuation was climbing, and on paper, I was making excellent returns. I calculated that by the time the funding round closed, I would have enough profit to pay Gran back, keep a substantial sum for myself, and still have money invested for the next round. I felt vindicated. I felt clever. I told myself I had made the right decision, that everything was going to work out perfectly. But then I started thinking, if 20,000 could generate this kind of return, imagine what I could do with more. The next funding round was coming up, with an even higher minimum investment of £75,000. If I could get that money together, I could potentially triple or quadruple my investment within a year. I did not have £75,000, but Gran did. So I went back to her, about 8 months after the first loan. This time, I told her I was having unexpected tax issues related to the flat purchase, complicated financial matters that required immediate cash that I would get back once everything was sorted with HMRC. I said I needed £30,000 just for a few months to handle the situation and avoid penalties. Again, she did not question me. She looked concerned about the tax troubles and asked if I needed help from my mother, who was a lawyer after all. I quickly said no, that it was all under control, that I just needed the cash temporarily to smooth things over. And again, she transferred the money within days, along with a note saying she hoped everything worked out and that I should not stress too much because these things always got sorted in the end. I took her £30,000 and I added it to the new investment round, along with the profits from the first investment. I was now in for over £100,000 total, most of it Gran's money, all of it based on lies. And for a while, it looked like it was going to work. The company continued to grow. The technology was getting changes in me during this period. I was distracted, secretive about my phone and my finances, less present in our relationship. She asked me several times if something was wrong, if I was in some kind of trouble. I told her everything was fine, that I was just focused on work, that I was under pressure to perform. She did not believe me, I could tell, but she did not push too hard because that was not her nature. She trusted me to tell her the truth when I was ready. I was lying to everyone by this point. My parents, my girlfriend, my best friend Bobby, and most egregiously, Gran. I had become so comfortable with deception that it felt almost normal, just part of doing business, managing my affairs, pursuing success. Gran and I still talked regularly. I called her every Sunday, a tradition we had maintained since I left for university. She would tell me about her week, about the book she was reading, about her garden and her friends in the village, and I would tell her carefully edited versions of my life, leaving out the massive financial fraud I was perpetrating with her money, the stress I was under, the web of lies I had woven. She started mentioning that she was feeling more tired than usual, that she was having trouble with her breathing sometimes. She attributed it to age, to the fact that she was pushing 80 and could not expect to have the energy she should have been. I was not thinking about how I had lost Gran's money, how I had betrayed her trust. I was thinking about my own loss, my own embarrassment, my own failed dreams of wealth and success. I spiraled into a depression that was entirely self-focused, mourning my lost opportunity rather than confronting what I had done to my grandmother. Sarah knew something was seriously wrong. I had become withdrawn, barely eating, not sleeping properly, snapping at her when she tried to help. Finally, she confronted me directly, said she could not continue in a relationship with someone who shut her out completely, who treated her like an inconvenience rather than a partner. And in a moment of weakness and anger, I told her everything. I told her about the money I had taken from Gran, about the lies I had told, about the investment that had collapsed and taken everything with it. And I watched her. She did not yell or cry. She just looked at me with profound disappointment and said that she did not recognize me, that the person she had fallen in love with would never have done something like this, and that she needed me to leave her flat and not contact her again. We had been talking about moving in together just a few months earlier. Now she was ending our relationship in the space of a single conversation, and I could not even argue because I knew she was right. I lost Sarah that night, and I deserved to lose her. She was a genuinely good person, and I had proven myself unworthy of her love, but I still had not told Gran. The money was gone, I had no way to pay her back, and I could not bring myself to confess what I had done. So I just avoided her. I started missing our Sunday calls, making excuses about work being busy, about travel, about anything that would justify my absence. When she called me directly, I would keep the conversation short, saying I was in the middle of something and would call her back later, which I never did. This went on for months. I was essentially ghosting my own grandmother, the woman who had raised me and loved me and trusted me with her money, because I was too cowardly to face what I had done. My parents started mentioning that Gran was asking about me, that she was worried because I had become so distant. My mother, in her typical emotionally detached way, said I should really make more effort to stay in touch because Gran was getting older and would not be around forever. But even that did not motivate me to come clean. I just made vague promises to visit soon and continued avoiding her. Then, about 4 months after the investment collapsed, I got a call from my mother that changed everything. She was calling from the hospital. Gran had collapsed at home and had been rushed to the emergency department. They had run tests and found advanced lung cancer that had already metastasized to other organs. The prognosis was not good. The doctors were saying months, not years, and possibly not even many months. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Suddenly, all my self-pity about the lost money seemed obscene and trivial. Gran was dying, thinking about all the Sunday calls I had dodged, all the times she had reached out and I had made excuses, all the opportunities I had wasted to be with her because I was too focused on my own problems. When I arrived at the hospital, my parents were there, along with Linda, the caregiver who had been helping Gran a few days a week for the past year. Gran was sleeping, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, monitors beeping softly around her. My mother pulled me aside and explained the situation in her clinical, lawyer-like way. The cancer was stage 4, very aggressive, and had likely been growing for over a year. Gran had been having symptoms for months, but had not wanted to bother anyone with her health concerns. By the time she collapsed and they ran proper tests, it was far too advanced for curative treatment. They could offer palliative chemotherapy that might buy her a few more months, but the quality of life would be poor, and Gran was considering refusing treatment and just focusing on comfort care. I stood there listening to my mother talk about my grandmother's death like it was a legal case to be managed, and I felt rage and grief and guilt all tangled together in my chest. This woman, who had given me everything, who had loved me unconditionally, who had trusted me with her money and her trust, was dying. And I had spent the precious time I could have had with her hiding from her, lying to her, stealing from her. When Gran woke up, she saw me standing by her bed, and her face lit up despite her obvious pain and exhaustion. She reached for my hand and said she was so happy to see me, that she had missed me, that she had been worried about me because I had seemed so distant lately. And I held her hand, this fragile, dying woman's hand, and I lied to her again. I said I was sorry I had been so busy, that work had been crazy, that I should have made more time. I did not tell her about the money. I did not confess what I had done. I just sat there and let her think I was the good grandson she believed in, because I was too selfish to burden her with the truth when she was facing death. Gran decided against aggressive treatment. She said she had lived a long, good life, and she did not want to spend her final months sick from chemotherapy just to maybe gain a few extra weeks. She wanted to go home, to her house in the Cotswolds, and spend whatever time she had left in the place she loved, surrounded by her things and her memories of my grandfather. The doctors arranged for hospice care at home. Linda, the caregiver, volunteered to move into the house full-time to help manage Gran's care, along with the hospice nurses. My parents arranged their schedules to visit regularly, though they were both too busy to actually stay for extended periods. And I, consumed by guilt and grief, took a leave of absence from work and moved into Gran's house to be with her. Living in that house again, the place where I had spent so many happy childhood moments, was both comforting and torturous. Every room held memories of better times, of the person I used to be before greed and ambition had corrupted me. Gran's bedroom, where I would climb into bed with her on Sunday mornings to read the papers. The kitchen, where she had taught me to bake bread and make proper Sunday roast. The garden, where we had planted vegetables and flowers and talked about life and dreams and what truly mattered. And everywhere I looked, I was reminded that I had stolen from this place, from this woman, that I had taken her trust and her money and squandered both on my own selfish pursuits. Gran's decline was faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks of coming home, she was mostly bedridden, the cancer consuming her energy and her strength. She slept a lot, managed her pain with medication that made her drowsy and confused, and had brief periods of lucidity where she could talk and engage with visitors. During those lucid moments, she wanted to talk about her life, about my grandfather, about me. She told me stories I had heard 100 times before, and new stories I had never known. She talked about meeting my grandfather when she was just 18, about their wedding during a rainstorm, about the miscarriages she had suffered before finally having my mother, about the joy of becoming a grandmother when I was born. She told me about her teaching career, about the students she had helped over the decades, about the satisfaction of watching children discover the joy of learning. She talked about this house, about how she and my grandfather had bought it when it was practically falling down and had restored it together, room by room, year by year, how every part of it held memories of their life together. And she talked about me. She said I had brought her tremendous joy, that watching me grow up had been one of the great privileges of her life. She said she was proud of the man I had become, that she knew my grandfather would. I never thought I would be the kind of person who would steal from their own grandmother. That is not how I saw myself, not how I wanted the world to see me. I had a good job, a nice flat in Manchester, a girlfriend who loved me, and a future that looked bright by any reasonable measure. But somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that what I wanted was more important than what was right, and that decision cost me more than I could have ever imagined. This is the story of how I cheated the one person who loved me unconditionally, how I prioritized money over family, and how I missed my chance to say goodbye to the woman who raised me to be better than I became. My name is Marcus Reynolds, and I am 31 years old, though I feel decades older when I think about what I have lost. This confession is not an attempt to gain sympathy or forgiveness. I do not deserve either. This is simply the truth about what happens when you let greed and entitlement override every moral principle you were ever taught, and how the consequences of those choices can haunt you for the rest of your life. My grandmother Eleanor, or Gran as I always called her, was the center of our family. After my grandfather James died 10 years ago, we've been proud too. She said she hoped I would remember the values she and he had tried to teach me: kindness, integrity, the importance of relationships over material success. Every word was a knife in my heart because I had betrayed every single one of those values. I was not the man she thought I was. I had not honored the lessons she had taught me. I had chosen money over integrity, personal gain over family loyalty, and I had done it to her, the one person who deserved my protection and honesty more than anyone. But I still did not tell her. I rationalized it in 1,000 different ways. I told myself she was too sick to handle the stress of knowing the truth. I told myself it would be cruel to burden a dying woman with my failures. I told myself I was protecting her, that letting her die believing in me was the kind thing to do. The truth was that I was protecting myself. I was too cowardly to face her disappointment, too weak to admit what I had done, too selfish to give her the opportunity to forgive me, or curse me, or react however she needed to react. I took that choice away from her because I could not handle the consequences of my own actions. My best friend Bobby came to visit during this time, driving up from Manchester to spend a weekend at the house. Bobby had known me since university, had watched my transformation from idealistic student to money-obsessed analyst, and had called me out several times for losing perspective on what mattered. We sat in the garden one evening after Gran had fallen asleep, drinking my grandfather's old whiskey and watching the sunset over the Cotswolds Hills. And Bobby, who had never been one to avoid difficult conversations, asked me directly if I was okay, because I looked like I was carrying the weight of the world, and something in me just broke. Maybe it was the whiskey, maybe it was the exhaustion from weeks of watching Gran die, maybe it was just the unbearable loneliness of carrying this secret. But I told him everything. The loans, the lies, the lost investment, the fact that I had stolen £50,000 from my dying grandmother, and she would never know what I had done because I was too much of a coward to tell her. Bobby listened to all of it without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I did not expect. He said that I still had time to tell her the truth, that maybe I owed her that honesty even if it was painful, that dying people often needed to resolve unfinished business, and maybe this was mine to resolve. I argued against it. I said it would be cruel, that it would ruin her final days, that there was no point in causing her pain when she could just die peacefully believing in me. And Bobby, my good, honest friend Bobby, said that I was being selfish, that I was choosing my own comfort over Gran's right to know the truth, that I was making decisions about what she could and could not handle without giving her any agency. He said that maybe the cruelty was not in telling her, but in letting her die surrounded by lies, in taking away her opportunity to decide how she wanted to respond, whether that was forgiveness or anger or anything in between. We argued about it for hours, and eventually Bobby left, disappointed in me. The hospice nurses were wonderful, managing her pain and dignity with compassion and professionalism. Linda was there constantly, tending to Gran's needs with genuine affection. My parents visited when they could, though they struggled with the emotional reality of watching my mother's mother die. And I was there every day, reading to her when she was awake enough to listen, holding her hand, adjusting her pillows, helping her sip water, doing all the physical tasks of caring while carrying the massive emotional burden of my unspoken betrayal. There were several times when I almost told her, moments when we were alone, when she was lucid, when the words were right there in my throat. But every time I swallowed them back down, told myself tomorrow would be better, that I would find the right moment, that I just needed a little more time. And then I ran out of time. It was a Tuesday morning, about 6 weeks after Gran had come home from the hospital. I had fallen asleep in the chair next to her bed, exhausted from a restless night. I woke to Linda gently shaking my shoulder, telling me that Gran's breathing had changed, that the nurse said it would not be much longer. I looked at Gran and saw that she was unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular, the distinctive pattern that meant death was close. Face what I had done. I told her I was sorry, that I had betrayed everything she taught me, that I had chosen greed over integrity and lost everything that mattered as a result. I told her I loved her, that she had been the best part of my life, that I was sorry I had become someone she would not be proud of. I begged her for forgiveness even though she could not grant it, could not even hear what I was saying. Linda was crying quietly in the corner, hearing this confession that had come too late to matter. The nurse stepped out to give me privacy, and I sat there holding my grandmother's hand, confessing to an unconscious woman, trying to unburden myself when the person who deserved to hear it could no longer respond. Gran died 3 hours later, in the early afternoon, with me holding one hand and my mother holding the other. My father arrived about 20 minutes after she passed. Her death was peaceful, a simple cessation of breath, a quiet ending to a life well lived, and I was left with the knowledge that she had died believing in me, believing I was the good, honest grandson she had raised, never knowing that I had stolen from her, lied to her, avoided her in her final months because I was too selfish to face the consequences of my own actions. The funeral was beautiful. Half the village came to pay respects to a woman who had touched so many lives through her teaching, her kindness, her quiet generosity. People told stories about how Gran had helped them, supported them, made their lives better, and I stood there, listening, thinking about how I had made her life worse, how I had taken advantage of her trust in the most fundamental way. After the service, my mother asked me to come to the reading of Gran's will. I had not even thought about the will, too consumed by grief and guilt to consider the practical matters of inheritance. We gathered in a solicitor's office in the nearby town, my parents and I, to hear Gran's final wishes. The will was straightforward. Gran had left her entire estate to be divided between my mother and me. The house, her investments, her savings, everything. The solicitor read through the specifics. The house valued at £1.2 million, investment accounts totaling approximately £400,000, plus various personal items and smaller accounts. And then the solicitor read a letter Gran had written to be opened after her death. It was addressed to me specifically. In the letter, Gran said that she knew I had been struggling financially, that she had suspected for some time that the money I had borrowed had not been for the purposes I claimed. She said she had chosen to trust me anyway, to give me the money without question, because she believed in me, because she knew I would find my way back to the values she had taught me, even if I had lost sight of them temporarily. She said she hoped I would use my inheritance wisely, that I would remember that money was a tool, not a goal, that the purpose of financial security was to enable a good life, not to be the good life itself. She said she had faith that I would eventually become the man I was meant to be, the man my grandfather would have been proud of. And she said she loved me, that nothing I could do would ever change that she forgave me for whatever mistakes I had made, because that is what family does for each other. I sat in that solicitor's office and read those words, and I realized that she had known. Maybe not the specific details, but she had known I was lying to her, that I had taken her money under false pretenses, that I had than if she had died ignorant of my betrayal, because it meant she had given me countless opportunities to be honest with her, to admit what I had done, to ask for her forgiveness directly, and I had been too cowardly to take any of those opportunities. I had let her die, carrying the burden of knowing her grandson was a liar and a thief, carrying it alone because I would not face it with her. The inheritance came to me as Gran had specified in her will. After taxes and the division with my mother, I received approximately £600,000, more than enough to pay back the money I had stolen from her, except she was dead and payment was meaningless now. My mother, in one of the few truly emotional moments I had ever witnessed from her, said that she was disappointed in me, that she had always thought I was better than the shallow status-seeking she and my father had modeled, that Gran had deserved better from me. It was the closest thing to a meaningful conversation we had ever had, and it was built on the foundation of my failure. The months after Gran's death were dark. I inherited a fortune and felt poorer than I ever had in my life. I had lost Sarah, who wanted nothing to do with me. I had lost Bobby's respect, though he was kind enough to maintain occasional contact. I had lost my grandmother, not just to death, but to my own cowardice and greed. I quit my job in finance, unable to stomach the culture of money worship that had led me so far astray. I sold my flat in Manchester and moved into Gran's house in the Cotswolds, the place where I had been happiest as a child, hoping somehow that being there would help me find my way back to the person I used to be. I started volunteering at the local library, the same place Gran had volunteered for years. I met people who had known her, who told me stories about her kindness and wisdom. I worked in the garden she had loved, maintaining the roses and vegetables she had planted, trying to honor her memory through actions since I had failed to honor her trust during her life. I went to therapy, trying to understand how I had become someone capable of stealing from my own grandmother. The therapist helped me see how my parents' emotional distance and success obsession had created vulnerabilities, how my need for external validation had overridden my internal moral compass, how I had confused achievement with worth and money with success. But understanding why I did what I did not undo the damage or bring Gran back, or give me the opportunity to apologize properly when it would have mattered. I started a scholarship fund in Gran's name, using part of the inheritance to support students from low-income families who wanted to pursue teaching careers. It was the kind of thing she would have loved, supporting education and helping young people build meaningful careers. I hoped it would honor her memory in a way my actions during her life had not. I reached out to Sarah, not to try to win her back, but to apologize for how I had treated her, for lying to her, for being someone unworthy of her love. She was kind but distant, said she appreciated the apology but had moved on and was seeing someone else. I told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. She deserved someone better than who I had been. Bobby and I slowly rebuilt our friendship, though it would never be quite what it was. He said he respected that I was trying to change, that I was doing the work to become better, but that trust, once broken, took a long time to repair. We met for drinks occasionally, talked about football and work and life, but there was a guardedness that had not been there before, a reminder that my actions had consequences beyond just my relationship with Gran. I found Gran's journals one day while cleaning out her study. Decades of daily entries, written in her careful handwriting, documenting her life with my grandfather, her teaching career, her thoughts on family and love, and what made life meaningful. I read them all, cover to cover, looking for I do not know what. Absolution, maybe. Understanding. In an entry from about 2 years before she died, she wrote about worrying about me, about noticing that I seemed changed, harder, more focused on material success than on building a meaningful life. She wrote that she hoped I would find my way, that she prayed I would not make the mistakes she saw coming, that she wished she knew how to reach me before I went too far down a destructive path. She had seen it happening. She had watched me transform into someone she did not quite recognize, and she had not known how to stop it. And reading that entry, I realized that I had not just betrayed her trust with the money. I had betrayed her hopes for me, disappointed her long before the theft by becoming someone obsessed with the wrong things, chasing the wrong goals, measuring my worth by the wrong standards. The money I stole was almost beside the point. The real betrayal was choosing to become someone she would not be proud of, someone who valued wealth over integrity, success over relationships, achievement over kindness. I have been living in Gran's house for almost 2 years now. I have made some peace with what I did, though I will never fully forgive myself. I have tried to build a life that would honor her memory, that would justify the faith she had in me even when I did not deserve it. I work part-time as a financial literacy teacher for a local charity, helping people from disadvantaged backgrounds understand money management and avoid the kind of predatory schemes and bad decisions that I myself fell victim to. It is meaningful work, the kind of thing Gran would have valued, using my skills for something other than personal enrichment. I date occasionally, though I have not found anyone I connect with the way I connected with Sarah. I am more honest now, more willing to be vulnerable, more aware of my flaws and the work required to manage them. But I also carry the knowledge of what I am capable of, the ways I can fail people who trust me, and that makes intimacy difficult. I maintain the house and garden meticulously, preserving Gran's legacy in the physical space she loved. Neighbors who knew her sometimes stopped by to share memories, to tell me stories about her impact on their lives. I listen to these stories and feel both grateful that she was so loved and ashamed that I took her for granted. The scholarship fund has supported 3 students so far, young people who want to teach despite the low pay and limited prestige, who value making a difference over making money. I met them all, heard their stories, saw their passion for education. I think Gran would have loved them. I hope, wherever she is, she knows I am trying to do something meaningful with the money she left me, the money I once stole and then inherited. But none of it changes the fundamental truth. I cheated my grandmother. I lied to her, stole from her, avoided her when she needed me, and then failed to confess when I had the chance. I missed my opportunity to say goodbye properly, to clear the air between us, to receive her forgiveness directly instead of through a letter read after her death. I live with that knowledge every day. I wake up in her house, surrounded by her things, her memory, the life she built. And I am reminded constantly of who she was and who I failed to be. The lesson I have learned, too late to help Gran, but perhaps not too late for the rest of my life, is this. Greed is not just about wanting more money. It is about being willing to sacrifice what truly matters to get it. It is about valuing the wrong things, prioritizing temporary gains over lasting relationships, choosing comfort over courage. I could have been honest with Gran from the beginning. I could have told her I wanted to make a risky investment and asked her advice instead of her money. I could have faced my financial failures and my relationship problems with honesty instead of hiding behind lies and avoidance. I could have confessed what I had done while she was still conscious, still able to respond, still able to grant or withhold forgiveness according to her own will rather than my assumptions. But I did not do any of those things. I chose the easy path, the comfortable path, the path that protected my ego and my image at the expense of truth and connection. And I paid for those choices with losses that cannot be recovered. The relationship I could have had with Gran in her final months, the honesty we could have shared, the reconciliation that might have been possible if I had been brave enough to risk it. To anyone reading this who is lying to someone they love, who is carrying a secret that is eating them alive, who is avoiding someone because they are ashamed to face what they have done, do not wait. Do not convince yourself you will find a better time, a better way, a better moment. The moment is now, while the person you have wronged is still alive, still able to hear you, still able to respond. Give them the truth, even if it is painful. Give them the choice of how to respond, even if their response is anger or disappointment or the end of the relationship, because living with unresolved is gone. But I do not get that chance. Time ran out, and I was too cowardly to use it wisely. So I live with the weight of what I did and what I failed to do, trying to build a life that would make Gran proud, trying to become the person she believed I could be even when I proved otherwise. Her house sits on a hill overlooking the Cotswolds, beautiful in every season, filled with her presence even though she is gone. I maintain it, as she did, with love and attention and respect for its history. And sometimes, working in the garden she planted, or reading in the study where she wrote her journals, I feel close to her in a way I never allowed myself to feel when she was alive, and I was avoiding her calls. This is my confession, my truth, my burden to carry. I cheated my grandmother, the woman who loved me most in this world. I stole from her, lied to her, and missed my chance to make it right. And I will live with that failure for the rest of my life, not as punishment, but as a reminder of what I am capable of when I let greed and cowardice guide my choices. If Gran could see me now, I do not know what she would think. I hope she would recognize that I am trying, that I am using her inheritance and her lessons to build something better. I hope she would forgive me, though I will never. I miss her wisdom, her laugh, her presence in the world, and I regret every lie I told her, every moment I avoided her, every choice I made that prioritized my comfort over our relationship. This is my truth, spoken too late for the person who most needed to hear it, but perhaps not too late to serve as a warning to others tempted down the same path I took. Do not cheat the people who love you. Do not let greed override integrity. Do not wait to say the things that matter, because someday, sooner than you think, you will run out of time, and you will have to live with whatever you left unsaid, whatever you left undone, whatever you chose to hide instead of confess. I ran out of time with Gran. I missed my chance to say goodbye properly, to apologize directly, to receive her forgiveness while she could still grant it. And that loss, that missed opportunity, is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Do better than I did. Be braver than I was. Tell the truth while there is still time to tell it. That is all I have left to offer. Over love. Gran deserved better than what I gave her, and I have to live with that knowledge every day, in the house she loved, surrounded by the life she built, trying to become the person she always believed I could be. That is my confession. That is my truth. That is the price I pay for cheating my grandmother and missing my chance to say goodbye.